Alright, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife. This is the American Blade Works Model 1 V3. And this is a knife that I've been interested in for a while. I first saw it on Instagram, started following American Blade Works, and Michael Martin of American Blade Works was kind enough to provide this knife to me for my feedback and review. And I was really excited to get it, and I'm looking forward to kind of giving my collected thoughts here. First of all, it comes in this nice embroidered zippered pouch with a business card, and you can pause this if you'd like to check out their website or follow them on social media. And what is American Blade Works? It seems to be a newer company, and I think that it is pretty much just Michael Martin, and they're making what I would call Midtech or true Midtech knives. And Midtech is a term that's used in the knife industry and knife community, and it's kind of vague, right? Are Chris Reeve and Hinderer knives Midtechs, or is something more like Demco knives that are, made on CNC but have hand processes? Where does Midtech fall in the, full production to full custom range? And it's something that I'm not really here to define. I think that there, are knives that are mid-techs that fall all the way from, in the spectrum from a Rat 2, which is a definitely full production knife, all the way to something like a full custom, made to my specifications, Jeffrey Mitchell slip joint. Where that term, or how much of that spectrum can be encompassed by the term mid-tech, depends on how you define it. But I would say that this is definitely a true mid-tech because it is what they call custom made on a CNC, and it's 100% American made, I believe, including the screws and hardware and everything. And it seems to have a higher level of quality control and focus on the knife. So I would definitely call this a true mid-tech knife. Now, you can find all these specifications on the website, like with most knives, but I'll run through them real quick. It has 6061 T6 aluminum handles, which you can see are anodized. The blade is S35VN. It has ceramic ball bearings. It has hardened screws. The liner is a steel I'm not familiar with, but 17 APH, and it has a ceramic detent ball and a titanium clip. The length closed is 4.67 inches. It's 0.5 inches thick, a 0.125 inch thick blade, and a 3.25 inch blade. So what drew me to this knife, first of all, is its design. If you watch my videos, I like simple handles because I find them to be more ergonomic. Something like a Benchmade Griptilian, nice simple handle, and fits really any kind of grip. And this knife looked like it would be that way, and it is. I have wide hands, kind of chubby fingers, and even being not a large knife, like I do tend to prefer things in the 3.75 inch to 4 inch blade range, something like a ZTO 561 or a Rat 2, or I'm sorry, Rat 1. But even being a little smaller than that, it has lots of grip area. So you can see I don't even need all of that grip area. There's a little extra at the bottom there. So very comfortable handle with this nice sweeping curve and the, again, curved downward spine area. Really comfortable in the hand. And I always like to ask kind of people who aren't as interested in knives as I am about a knife when I'm, reviewing it. And when I showed this to some of my family members who aren't into knives, one of their comments was that they thought that the handle was really nice. So it's something that even if you're not, a big appreciator of knives, you can tell that this is a nicely done handle. And one thing that they mentioned is that this CNC machining, these nice lines are well done so that they are not sharp and don't dig into your hand, but would provide some extra grip. In fact, they said when you're cutting potatoes and your hands are wet, you'd still be able to hold on to it. And I agree. I like this CNC machining that it has. It's nice looking. It adds to this kind of slender, sleek look because of the direction of that machining, but it also does provide a little bit of grip while you're holding on to the knife. I also think that this anodization is done really well. I like aluminum handles a lot, actually. But that said, they do sometimes scratch, especially when you're carrying it in your pocket, if there's keys and stuff. This hasn't really scratched much. This is the only little spot here that it has. I think this is more of other metal rubbing off onto it. So it seems to be, nicely anodized and has a good matte feel to it. Another thing that I thought was really great looking about this knife is the blade shape. It has about as classic a drop point blade shape as you can get. Really nice, gentle drop towards the tip, and then a pretty standard amount of belly and some straight edge also. And it looks just as good as it did in the pictures in person, and it has worked really well for all kinds of cutting. I've cut a lot of cardboard with this knife. I have done some food prep. I've done some like carving, cutting branches off of trees, things like that, and it's done well with everything. It came nice and sharp, and I was able to sharpen it to a good edge again. So I really like the blade shape and design also. You'll notice that it has a slight saber grind, being that it doesn't come all the way up to the spine towards the ricasso here. And it does have a built-in, I didn't add this, a built-in sharpening choil. So a lot of people really like sharpening choils. I'm kind of ambivalent on them. Sometimes I think they can catch when you're cutting things. I didn't find that a lot with this knife, and I don't know if it's because it's not too big of a sharpening choil or if it's because the sharpening choil sits almost covered by the handle. And you do get pretty much a full 3.25 inches of edge on this, if I haven't mentioned that yet. But I didn't mind the sharpening choil, so if you like sharpening choils, it's a nice addition. Now, as for the action, the flipping, it is a flipper, as you can see. The flipper is pretty big, and at first I wasn't sure why that was. It seemed bigger than it needed to be honest. And then again, it's why I think it's valuable to ask people who are not maybe have the preconceptions about knives that I have. I asked another person in my family, and they just naturally came up onto this grip. So putting your index finger up and actually using this area here like a finger choil. And for whatever reason, I hadn't thought of doing that. I don't know if it's not as, blatantly clear as something like a Spyderco Native 5 that it's a finger choil, but I hadn't thought of it, and once that family member did, it really works well. You can choke up, and your finger's not going to be touching the edge again, partly because of that sharpening choil, and it gives you a good grip. You can really hold on to it because of that, because it is a larger flipping tab. So I actually like that. It's something where I do like to have a finger choil, a forward finger choil on knives sometimes. I found it to be useful when I was doing some finer cutting type stuff, as well as I needed to kind of, not that I suggest, prying with your knife, but kind of needed to really dig down in and get a lifting cut with the belly, and it helped with that. So it's an interesting feature that I hadn't thought of, but I think that is why this flipper tab is a little bigger than you might expect, and this area here is nicely curved to fit the finger. So it does have that forward finger choil ability to grip it like that. It came with pretty much perfect centering. You can see it's right in line with that center gap, or not gap, but where the two handle scales come together. It came with beautiful flipping, as you can see, super easy to flip. That's another thing when I showed this to people who are not familiar with knives. Once they knew that that was how you opened it with a flipper, they were pretty much always able to open it without much, wrist flick or not deploying the full way. And that's because the detent is like dialed in. I'll show you here how it closes. So you see that it kind of really pulls down into that detent hole, and it does hold it in nicely so that when you do break the detent, it snaps right open. So nice flipping action. Again, it does have ceramic ball bearings, so it drops closed. And it seems, this is something that isn't advertised on the website, and I mentioned to them that if it is a feature, they should put it on the website, is that it seems like it has a ramped detent. So it seems like there's a slight ramp on the tang of the knife that helps with the smoothness of that opening. There's not that kind of drop and then opening, or at least not as much as on most production knives. So that's another nice feature that makes it really smooth. And it also, even with that nice smooth opening, absolutely no blade play when locked, and even when unlocked, which is kind of a unnecessary, I would say, way to test for blade play. But even when unlocked, there's absolutely no side-to-side blade play. So really, really well put together in that sense with the action and lockup and centering. Another thing that I think is a good kind of design or aesthetic element on this knife, and again was mentioned by someone who I showed this knife to, is the fact that the hardware blade and including the titanium clip are so well matched in the color and texture. So a lot of coatings, and I'm not exactly sure what coating this is. I should have asked, I just didn't think to, but this coating is really, really well matched in the color to the coating or the color of the pivot, the screws, and even the uncoated plain titanium clip. The kind of matte gray is pretty much exactly the same across all of those. And even the texture, the titanium clip has kind of a stone-washed matte texture that really matches well with the blade. This coating is not as smooth as something like a Spyderco DLC, but it is smooth enough that it hasn't caused me, any major noticeable trouble with cutting. You can see that I can't remember what this was from, what the black coloring that kind of rubbed off onto the coating was from. Might have been from cutting plastic, but there has been a little bit of material rubbed off onto the blade that I was cutting, but it hasn't really held it up or gotten stuck in material because of the coating, as far as I can tell. So I do really like how they've matched the color and texture of all of the hardware to the blade. Now, there are some things that I think could... one last thing that I really like is the minimalism of the branding. You see a lot of companies, ZT gets called out for it sometimes, what people call billboarding, and that's just that there's a bunch of stuff written on the blade. Now, I'm not as much of a hater of the billboarding as some people are, but it is something that I think it's nicer when it's a little bit more minimalistic, and that's definitely the case here. So the only branding is on the pivot, and the pivot has a really nice feature here. Instead of just being a circle, so that sometimes when you're adjusting the pivot or taking the knife apart, it can spin, you can see that it has this flat area here. So it's not going to spin when you're adjusting the pivot or anything like that. And I really like that. That's something that can be really, really frustrating when you're adjusting a knife. Again, I haven't had issues with it on this knife, but this is just a comparison. You can see this is just a fully circular pivot, and this isn't. I think it's a nice feature. It makes it less frustrating to put your knife back together and try to get the action dialed in or the lockup dialed in and everything. But I really like this simple ABW brand or logo that they have here. I think that it shows you who made the knife, what the knife is without it being splashed all over the blade and everything. And then the only other thing is that S35VN is etched on the blade on the back side or the PAL side or the clip side. And I think that's always a good thing to put what the steel is. You don't really want it to be a mystery what the steel is on a knife. So I really like the amount of branding and writing that they put on this knife, along with that pivot that won't turn. Another thing that I really like about this knife that I almost forgot to mention, that's another kind of design feature that doesn't necessarily, it's not a practical feature, but it's just a nice touch that is kind of shows you that this is a Midtech and has had a lot of attention put to it, is if you notice the tang of the knife, it's rounded and it fits with the curve of the handle here, and it actually stays with that curve the whole way until open. So it gives it a really nice look, where on some knives, especially on some flippers, it can the tang of the knife can kind of stick up here, so you can have that kind of exposed. And it's not, again, a practical thing, but I think it gives a nice clean look that as this opens, the tang of that knife stays with the curve of the handle. So again, just a nice little aesthetic design touch that I think adds to the high quality look and feel of the knife. Now, as I was about to say, there are some things that I think could be slightly improved. One of those is that there's very little cutout. There is some of a cutout. You can see this here, but there's very little cutout to get at the lock bar when you're unlocking the knife. Now, it's not a big issue when you don't have gloves on or anything like that. And I usually, I don't wear gloves that often. I think some people who work in different, types of work might wear gloves more often than me, but I don't wear them that often. That said, it is somewhat tough to get to. So you kind of have to push up into that lock bar, then push across. If you just push across, you can get it, but it's easier if you kind of press up in and then push across. And because of that, because you have to kind of get up in there, sometimes you see how it pushed back up. So now it's not going to drop closed. And drop closed action is not something that's necessary on a knife. It is not a practical feature, but it's something that people like. It's something that I appreciate, to be honest. And I do think that that was one of the things that I, in my feedback to Michael Martin, I said you might want to add a little bit more of a cutout there. And I'm not sure that they did it because I said that, but it seems like they on the newer version of this knife, they have added more of a cutout at the lock bar to help get to it. So I think that that's an improvement, and I'll have a picture put in here of that new design. Another thing, and this is a much small, both of these two things are much less practical issues, I guess I would say. You can see that this screw, it doesn't, it's not like it's actually unseated or completely exposed, but some of the wall of the screw here is exposed because of the sculpting on the handle. And the sculpting is another nice feature. It feels good in the hand, partly also contributed by that, but it does kind of expose some of that screw. Not something that I noticed in use, not something that affected the comfortability of the grip, but something that I think just people might notice aesthetically, is that you can kind of catch your finger on that screw. And then the last thing is the clip. Now, I don't know if this is part of the design element or if this is something that just this knife that I received had, but I do think it's kind of something that you see more on sculpted titanium clips, is that you can see it sets above the handle scale. Now, I actually think that this clip works really well. I never had trouble putting it in or taking it out of my pocket, and I never had it, kind of start to move out of my pocket because it sits higher like that. I never had any issues with that whatsoever, so it's really not a practical issue. The clip works well, but I think some people, they might be surprised to see that it sets above the handle like that. Now you'll notice when you look at the clip that there are 2 screws under there. And it's interesting, those screws hold the liner that forms the lock into the handle. So it's kind of a nice simple way to hold that in. But the interesting thing is that you can't take the clip off without taking the blade apart. And in fact, I'm taking the knife apart. In fact, I haven't taken this knife apart purely because I haven't needed to, and I don't really take knives apart unless I need to clean them or adjust something. So I haven't taken it apart, and I'm not 100% sure you can take the clip off. I would assume once you take the scales apart, you could unscrew the clip, but I'm not 100% sure. So it is right hand tip up carry only, as far as I can tell. So those are 3 things that I kind of suggested might be worth looking into adjusting slightly. Now, another thing on the picture that American Blade Works posted recently is that it looks like they might have changed this screw. I'm not sure if it's just not in the picture that I saw, or it hasn't been done, and that process hasn't been done yet in the picture that I saw, but they might actually have changed that slightly so that this screw won't be there at all. So again, you can see that in the picture that I impose into the video here. But that's one thing that I wanted to talk about, is that this is the Model 1 V3. So they've had 3 versions so far, and it seems to me like they're a company, and Michael Martin himself is really willing to improve on the knives that he's making, and wants to constantly improve and make a really good knife. It seems like he's really interested in feedback and making the best knife that he can. And I really appreciate that. I think that's a great thing, especially for that type of company that is a small company and making Midtech knives. I think it's important to, get feedback on the knives and improve them, and it looks like they're doing a really good job of that. So because of that, I'm really looking forward to what American Blade Works has in the future. They have a couple different knives. They have a Model 2, I think it's called, so nice, simple, easy to remember names. And they also have an EDC keychain knife. Now, they also provided this knife to me, and I am going to be doing a video on it, if I can get it out of its bag. And this is that knife. So again, nice, simple branding, and a really interesting little knife that I will be doing a video on. And they also seem to have some other designs in the works. So I'm really looking forward to the future of American Blade Works. I think that they are doing good stuff, and I'm looking forward to checking out more knives from them. And with all that said, one thing that I wanted to keep to the end of this video, because I wanted to give you the full picture on this knife before I said this, is the price of this knife. So with all that said, with the nice features like the nice milling, the colorway of the blade and the hardware, the fact that it's a true Midtech and 100% American made, has good materials, such a nice design, you might think, oh, this knife is a $300 knife, maybe $400 knife, somewhere in that range. But right now, the last time I looked on American Blade Works' website, this knife is $185. And that is less than a lot of American-made full production knives. For example, pretty much any ZT knife is going to be more than that. A lot of Benchmade knives are going to be more than that. Even some Spyderco knives like this, or a Shaman, are going to be more than that. And I think that it's a great value. I think that it's something where these knives are probably going to go up in price as American Blade Works establishes itself in the marketplace and in the community, and I think that they have room to grow with the price and still be a good value. So especially with, it looks like some of those updates or slight design modifications that I thought might be a good addition being put into place, I would definitely suggest checking these out. I think it's a great value at that price, and I've really enjoyed carrying it. I carried this knife solidly for at least a couple weeks and used it a lot before even starting to get this review and feedback together. And I also tried to carry it alongside other knives that had similar features, like, again, the handle, comparing the handle to the Benchmade Griptilian. This is going to be a quick comparison section of the video too, comparing the EDC ability of the Native 5, comparing the flipping action of the Wii Laconico Mass Drop Keen, which I would say that the Model 1 matches or betters it. And then also I wanted to, just for my viewers who are more into traditional knives, here is a classic case trapper for size comparison, and a Great Eastern Cutlery number 15. And it really fared favorably in all those aspects to the knives that I carried it with. So again, great value, I think, at its current price, considering the features and its production, and I suggest checking it out. So again, I really appreciate it, and big thanks to Michael Martin of American Blade Works for providing this knife, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm trying to keep my videos a little shorter, didn't quite do it on this one, but keep trying anyway. And if you do enjoy my videos, please like the video. You can feel free to leave any comments if you have questions or any thoughts on it. And please subscribe to my channel. You can hit the bell for notifications. Also check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife topics. I also have some, like stickers available, things like that. And then check me out on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and stuff, all at Knife Thoughts. And as always, don't forget to go out and do good.